Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, our guest is Michael Arnold. Michael is the author of the book Slacking Off, A Successful Way to Work from Home. And he wrote it especially for those who are considering to work or are working from home and are seeking a work-life balance. He has been a work-from-home entrepreneur for over 15 years, and he's worked with major corporations such as Cox Automotive, Verizon Super Pages, and major commercial finance companies. His journey wasn't a smooth sailing one, since he is also human just like us, and he made many mistakes along the way. But he has lived to share some wisdom from his own experience to help people on their work from home journey to create successful actions on their own. So without further delay, let's jump right into this conversation with Michael. Welcome, Michael.
Oh, thank you, Yannick. Good to be here.
Awesome. Okay, Michael, even though we read a little bio about our guests, we always like to give them the opportunity to kind of just share with us a little bit about their journey. How is it, in your own words, would you describe how you've got from where you are now to where you were before? You know, how did you get to where you are today?
So, a lot of ups and downs and experimenting in different industries led me to be a work from home entrepreneur and, a father and, let's say, contributor to the community. And I think ultimately, like most of us, I started out trying to be, everything I could be at a young age before I was 18, worked normal jobs like McDonald's, Christmas tree lots, doing landscaping and lots of different things at a very, very young age. And still was looking to find what I enjoyed. And that became understanding businesses really fast and, sharing, whether it be speaking or presenting or consulting. And I think ultimately when we learn from our mistakes and we're better people for it, and we've survived the misses, the bullets that fly our way, metaphorically, and can live to tell about it. I think that's essentially what's brought me here is my ability to survive through all things, or persevere, if you will.
Amazing. All right. So in your bio, we read that you wrote a book, and we were having a brief discussion about this prior to actually starting the recording. And so for those of our listeners that didn't catch the name of that book, it's Slacking Off, A Successful Way to Work from Home. So could you share with us maybe in 5 to 8 or 9 minutes just what the book is about, who is it targeted for, and how can it help our listeners?
So I wrote this book because I've been working from home for 15 years, and I've worked for myself. I've worked for other companies, major corporations, very, 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 very large corporations that have, thousands and thousands of employees. And I've been mostly in either a sales role or a strategy role or a management role. And what I found over the years is that basically people around me, including myself, were struggling a lot with work-life balance. And usually the really successful guy or gal that's really good at work is missing out at home. And very rarely are they balancing between the two. And it doesn't necessarily mean these people don't exist, but it's just rare. And a lot of times, people who are putting themselves into work obsessively, are successful, but again, not happy. And so I created this book to help people who want to actually take that, obsession, which is amazing. It's not a bad thing. It's a great thing when you're doing it in the right ways. And just get a little more time for themselves and help them invest more in themselves, whether that's with time and effort or even money, of course, if they find something that's good for them, because themselves they are the most valuable product that exists. I mean, you can buy a car, you can buy a house, you can buy nice clothes, you can have all these things, but unless you're investing in yourself, it really isn't going to pay off as big as it would be if you did invest in yourself. So that's ultimately this book is to help you invest more time, effort into yourself and do it in a way that's unique. Pun intended, I guess.
Very cool. Now, could you share with our listeners, since you have so much experience working from home, this was quite new for many people last year, March, when the pandemic just hit. Could you share with
Yeah.
maybe our listeners maybe 1 to 3 things, competencies or behaviors that you think someone who is working from home needs to embrace in order to be successful?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just gonna obviously use my book as the foundation here for this question, because this is exactly how I set this book up. Was exactly the things you need to know and the things that you should have in place when you work from home, whether you're experienced or not. And that is, one, you should recognize what you do when you're not working. It sounds so obvious. Most people are like, yeah, of course I know when I'm not working. But do you really? Because what I found over the years is that, even for myself, which I use myself as the example here, is that sometimes what I actually consider not working for myself is different from what I consider not working for somebody else. And I'll just very lightly explain a little more into that, so there's no confusion there or nebulousness.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what I would look at you and say, you're working when you're doing this and not working when you're on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, versus me, might be different. I might judge myself less than I judge, or more or less than I judge you. And so what I did is I put myself up on the microscope and said, how much scrutiny, all unbiasedness, right? Just straightforward looking at myself, what's actually working and what's not considered working. Like, is being on Facebook for 5 minutes a problem? Probably not that big of a deal,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the middle of a workday, but it's not technically working. And it doesn't matter that your boss or your company or yourself, it doesn't matter what your employer says. What matters is actually how you feel. And usually when people aren't doing a task as they are paid to do, eventually they start to, let's just say, have more problems. And it starts very small. So ultimately, everybody starts off with what's called a slacking off day, which is you take one day and you just slack off. You actually avoid work the entire day on purpose, and you just slack off. That's it. And so what the only caveat or disclaimer to that entire thing is that you write down what you do. You know, if it's reading a magazine, reading a book, on Facebook, watching TV, exercising, whatever it is you do to slack off, it's important to recognize that first and foremost before you do anything. Then you carry that into your workday, and you have that list, whether it's digital or on paper, in front of you, to actually help you recognize when you're actually starting to slack off, so that you recognize that the next chapter of what you need to do, which is start to actually make time for yourself to slack off. Because why is it that some of us slack off? There's probably hundreds of reasons, but I think fundamentally what the purpose and the confidence that you need, or the let's just say consistency you need to have, is being able to move throughout your day and do it in a way that you're happy with, right? Do it in a way that keeps you going. And if you have time to slack off in the morning or in the evening or whenever, I bet you'll probably slack off less during the times that you probably shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately, you want to make sure that you recognize for yourself and keep yourself accountable, because nobody else. It doesn't matter if your boss is mean or not. It doesn't matter if you're being watched or not, right? You're in an office or you're not in an office. At the end of the day, the only person that judges you is you and God, right? So at
true.
the end of the day, you need to be right with yourself and God,
Mm-hmm.
right? More than you need to be right with other people. And of course, you should be respectful and ethical, but that's kind of the gist. That's just a little piece. I mean, there's obviously a lot more, but that should answer the question, right?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much for sharing.
Excellent.
Awesome. So if our listeners want to tap into that awesome resource that you have created, they can hop onto Amazon and access it there. Really, really great tool to help them kind of strategize and increase their productivity. All right.
Yeah.
Now, could you also share with us, Michael, as an entrepreneur yourself, there's a lot of things that have changed since the pandemic, and you are a consumer yourself. You mentioned before we started recording that you were in an Uber for the first time in over a year. Have you seen customer experience change much since the pandemic as a consumer or even as a business owner?
Of course, of course. I mean, that's you know, it's consistently changing. And first, something I wanted to say early on was that forgive me for not coming out with this book before the pandemic, as I started writing it in 2019. But it's listen, I think ultimately, it's a dream for most people to work from home. So the fact that the businesses that are existing now are tailoring work from home experience and making it easier, it actually pushed a lot of people on the fence of making their employees work from home, making their businesses more work from home friendly, making their products more work from home friendly, and all the technology that comes with it. There's a lot of reasons why working from home is beneficial, and there's a lot of reasons why in certain jobs they're not. But ultimately, what we're finding, and you forget, please chime in here if you have something to say about it. But is that it's actually not as hard to work from home for a lot of these businesses or even these services to provide work from home experiences as we thought. I mean, look at the Weather Channel people who are giving you the weather forecast from their home office.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that hard.
It
You know
isn't.
what I mean?
I agree with you. But I think, as you said, a lot of people were forced to embrace the whole work from home. As the pandemic came, they were forced into it. If it was a choice that they had to make and things were operating normal and we weren't going through a pandemic, I highly doubt that many companies would have even thought of, implementing it.
Right.
I've met with many business owners, or even senior managers who, when they look at their balance sheets in terms of so much savings that they've made as an organization, productivity has actually improved with the employees working from home. Of course, with everything, there are advantages and disadvantages, because I'm sure there are some other things that may suffer as a result. But it still doesn't mean that there are a lot of industries where people were working that they couldn't have worked from home and been productive and created the same or even better results.
Yeah. Any thoughts? I mean, like, what's your, there's a couple reasons for me, but I'm curious, what's your thought about why somebody who's, working from home is producing more
Well,
than somebody who's in the office?
Well, I worked from home before the pandemic. So I'm not even sure if I could compare myself, but if I use persons who I know personally, like I have a friend that works in an insurance company. He works in the pensions department. And like one of the things he said to me why he feels he's more productive is he works many times way past 5, because I guess when you're at work, when it's 5 o'clock, you get up, you pack up your stuff and you head home. But because he's home, he just keeps working, and sometimes he works until 9, 10 o'clock. It's when he looks at the clock, he's like, oh my, I'm still working. It's time to like shut the computer down and just kind of unwind. So I don't know if other people fall into that category, but that was his experience. And I was like, that wouldn't have happened if you were working in the office, unless you were working on some special project and it was required for you to stay back late. Ordinarily, people would just, leave at the time that work ends and they go home.
Right, right. And that's, what, that is exactly what occurs. We're our own worst critic and we're our biggest driver, right? So it's like we're not only our own worst critic, but we're also our own motivator.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of leads into what I was saying earlier. It's like, that's exactly why I wrote this. I wrote this for your friend. I wrote this for him because, and of course, anybody else who is like so happy about working from home that they're starting to form these habits that they're not paying attention to, of overworking to the point where eventually it doesn't actually produce much. Now, I want to say something. I am very much for somebody putting everything they got into something, and I definitely don't advocate people being lazy.
Mm-hmm.
The point of the book being slacking off is actually to appeal to the person who is struggling because maybe they're slacking off too much, or maybe because you want more time to yourself, but ultimately recognizing that it's okay to work 12 hours and 15 hours a day. It's actually not a problem. I actually, I'm doing business 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I still, always use my own book as a tool and a roadmap for myself to make sure I maintain a work-life balance. But I mean, ultimately, you want to make sure you're taking care of yourself, and you want to make sure that you sustain properly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, you cannot not invest in yourself, right? whatever it's nutrition or exercise or reading. I mean, there's 60 books a year are some of the top CEOs in the world, right? 60 books a year is what they read while managing their own work and life. And I'm sure they have their ways of doing it. But ultimately, a year after doing that, working 9 hours a day until 10 o'clock at night or whatever, eventually it becomes either I'm doing it because I'm great or I'm doing it for different reasons or whatever. But as long as they don't have built-in time for themselves, eventually they're slaving away to a job and doing way more. And if they're getting paid hourly, that's great. But it's like, it may not be worth it. I mean, I know people that get paid $1,000 to $2,000 an hour, and they work nonstop, but they spend time with their family. They spend time for themselves. And everybody's happy, or at least happy enough, and so there's a difference, right? So that's really ultimately, I think what's happening too, which you totally hit the nail on the head, right? That's exactly what occurs. We overwork ourselves because we're like, yeah, and that's what employers who are experienced in working from home, having work from home people, that's what they know. They know that ultimately the person who, you may get a lazy guy who will manipulate people, or a gal who manipulate people and work very little.
True.
But you'll get a majority people who will overwork.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, Michael, could you share with our
Yeah.
guests, how do you stay motivated every day? You work from home. What are some of the things that you do to kind of motivate yourself? Because the reality is we're human, and even if you really enjoy what you do, which, I do personally, and so, there are days when physically I may not feel as enthusiastic, but there are little things that I'll do, like maybe exercise or, listen to some music to kind of just, get my mood or energy up. What are some of the things that you do to kind of keep yourself motivated?
Another part of my book is on this. I totally understand, some days you are less motivated than others. There's actually a lot of reasons for that. What I personally do is I raise my purpose. If I'm feeling less motivated today for whatever reason, I increase my purpose. So if my purpose, and this is another chapter in my book, is to have, you look at the reasons you're doing what you're doing. Why do you work? It may be, pay my bills. Don't be ridiculous. Don't be general. Let's be specific, right? Why do you do it? I do it to pay for this. I do it to pay for that. I want to go on vacation. I want to do this. I want to have that. Oh, wow, I didn't realize I expect to have a raise in the next year, or whatever it is. But your purposes are what drive you. And we forget about those purposes if we've been doing things for a very long time, unless we're so successful that we're building new purposes. But a barrier, whether it's personal or outside of yourself, is something that is, raised up in front of you, right? It's anything. It's unmotivation. It's problems. It's lack of winning. Whatever it is, I just increase my purpose. I say, something's holding me back. Listen, I'm facing something right now that's stopping me from, or attempting to stop me from doing things. I won't necessarily get into details, but I'll just say, I every day I'll reach a point where it's definitely a little bit frustrating because I want to go do one thing and I've got all these other things trying to get in my way, right? And all I remember and know is that as a being, nothing stops me ever. The only thing that actually stops me is me. That's it. There's no one and nothing that's ever truly ever stopped me from doing or getting what I want, ever. But as a being, what you're talking about is motivation. That does stop you. So just remembering, like, hey, if you can't figure the reasons for why you're doing what you're doing, or you can't add more reasons, add more things. If you're unmotivated, that's what I do. I add more things, and I say, okay, I want all these things, and that's why I do what I do. I now want double that, triple that. And I add, and I add, and I add. Give me more reasons why you do what you do. If you're unmotivated, add more reasons why you want to do more. You want more, you build more, not less, right? you know, a lot of people have a tendency to get lazy and downtrodden, you know, when they're not getting what they want, me included. And you just have to remind yourself, you know, you're a producer, and producing is what makes us happy, right? When we're moving and shaking, no matter what that is we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's anyway, increase your purposes, I guess, is the simple answer.
Right. Okay. All right, Michael. Could you also share with us what's the one online resource, tool, website, or app that you absolutely can't live without in your business?
You know, I'd say just honestly the calendar. You know,
Okay.
Google Calendar, Apple, like I use the calendar a lot. I think if I didn't use it digitally, I would use a planner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think back in the old days, people used to use book, you know, I don't know what they're called. I guess the planners is just
Mm-hmm.
what they were, with little calendars on them, and that's how they wrote their appointments and they look at their schedule. I think whether you're drawing it, you know, on a piece of paper or you have it digitally, those calendars are everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the end of the day, time is all we got. You know,
Yeah.
that's really what we have, and we're either selling our time or we're buying it. So, you know, you should be I mean, that should be the first thing that you teach your kid, is about how to manage their time.
Mm-hmm.
That should be the number one thing, other than, you know, obviously how to survive, of course. But time is important. You know,
Yeah.
calendars are important for you. They're tools for you to use, you know, and I got to tell you, I also wrote this book for the person that was like me, who for years refused to use a calendar because I didn't want to be predictable. I did not want to be predictable for myself or anything. I like the adventure of spontaneous movement and things. You know what I mean? Like, I was that guy that would just barely make it to the deadline, you
Oh,
know?
wow.
But I wasn't ever late. I would just barely make it to the appointment. Wasn't really late.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked that. And I could manage it very well. And I became very good at shooting from the hip and winning.
Okay.
But when I actually started doing things on a calendar, oh, goodness, then I was dangerous.
Okay. Could you also share with our listeners maybe one or two books that have had the biggest impact on you? It could be a book that you read recently or a book that you read a very long time ago, but it still has had a great impact on you.
Yeah, you know, I there's a couple of books. One is I would say Never Split the Difference. That's a great book on negotiating. I'll share with you three if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And the 10X Rule by Grant Cardone.
Mm-hmm.
The
That one's
10X
good.
Rule is actually, it's been surprised. I mean, I was very surprised how good that was. I mean, he's a great guy. Everything he stands for has been tremendous. And then there's another one called The Reluctant Messiah, which has been a really interesting book. It's more of a kind of a fictional nonfiction. It's called Illusions, actually, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. It's kind of a book that takes you on this journey of a guy trying to coach another guy to help him, you know, through his life. And it's just very metaphorical, but man, is it huge. It's such a great book. And I'm not a big fiction guy. So it was, when I looked at it, I was like, I read it, but it blew my mind. It was
Okay.
very, very cool.
Awesome. So we'll have the links to those books in the show notes of this episode. Now, Michael, could you share with our audience what's the one thing that's going on in your life right now that you're really excited about? Either something that you're working on to develop yourself or your people.
Well, obviously, I'm really excited about slacking off. I'm excited about the book. Excited about getting this out to as many people right now during their work from home all over the world. Listen, I created this book because I saw so many people having problems and becoming, you know, unhappy in their life. And I created this to help those people, whether they looked at one chapter or all of them. It's a very simple, easy book. You can read it in like an hour and a half. It's very, very simple, but it's full of stuff. Other than that, you know, I work currently in a medical technology field where I'm trying to help a company named ROM Technology essentially just develop business with them and help them grow as a company and continue to just progress. I support them through a lot of different efforts, but, you know, it's mostly focused to help people get better after surgery and rehab their you know, legs or knees or hips, so they don't necessarily have to leave their house to do a certain amount of rehabilitation.
Okay.
It also helps lower narcotic usage so that we have less people taking pain pills. It gets them better faster. So a lot of time is dedicated to that too. And I'm very excited about it because it helps people and it costs less money and it drives down their narcotic usage, which I'm not a fan of people taking pain pills, you know what I mean, unless it's absolutely necessary. So it's a really, really great product and great company. And they have such a great team, and they're, so many people supporting, so many doctors of specialties that don't even have anything to do with rehab love it and are supporting it. And I've been spending a lot of time trying to help them grow and do everything I can to play my part, for sure.
Okay. All right. Sounds awesome. Okay. Now, Michael, our guests would have listened to this episode and they're quite intrigued with what you're doing, your book, your journey. They'd like to follow you. Where can they find you online to kind of continue with you on your journey?
So if they go to Facebook, there's a Slacking Off book page. There's a Twitter Slacking Off book, and then there's an Instagram Slacking Off book. That's primarily where I have things about the book, and as the book continues. Personally, I don't really have a lot I definitely have an Instagram and a Facebook page. I think Facebook's a little more personal, family, things like that. You can definitely, reach me on Instagram, and the Slacking Off book is the name, or Facebook or Twitter.
Okay. All right. So we look those handles up for those different platforms that you mentioned and have them in the show notes of this episode for our listeners. Now, before we wrap the episode up, we always like to ask our guests, do you have a quote or a saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you'll tend to revert to this quote? It kind of helps to refocus you or get you back on track.
I use so many quotes. I'll quote, I believe this quote came from Ben Franklin, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe that the quote is very simple. Actually, I'm wrong. It's Sir Winston Churchill. Mm-hmm. It's kites, like, the things you play with in the wind, right? Mm-hmm. With a string. Kites rise highest against the wind, not with it. Doesn't mean rebel against everybody, but what it means is do, what you do. And if you believe in something, go for it. Doesn't matter if people say, don't go this way, or you can't do this, or you can't create a podcast, you can't do your own business. Do it. Jump, take your risks, and you'll surprise yourself. You'll very much surprise yourself.
Very good. All right. That's
a little bit of my own ad-libbed quote. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for sharing. We'll definitely have that in the show notes of the episode. Well, thank you, Michael, for taking time out of your very busy day to hop on our podcast and share all of these great insights. Tell us about your book, how it can help persons that are working from home, how to increase your productivity, the importance of time. As you said, you're either buying your time or selling your time, and really just trying to navigate this journey that we're all on called life, and trying to be more productive and really living to our best purpose in the best way possible. So we really appreciate you taking time to share with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Just want to remind our listeners that you can hop onto Facebook and join our private Facebook group, Navigating the Customer Experience Community, and feel free to follow us on Twitter at NavigatingCX. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant. We also have a new book available on Amazon, The ABCs of a Fantastic Customer Experience. It's available in ebook and paperback. So if you want to increase revenue in your organization, build a stronger service culture, and create employees or develop employees who are really mastering service delivery in your business, you need to grab a copy of this book. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.